It's all about choices, isn't it? I mean, we call it priorities, but it's choices really. I've been making a lot of choices and that's tiring in the end. I know the rest of it's tiring too, but constantly having to make that kind of decision wears you down. Oh yeah, there were protocols and they do make decision making easier, but in the end you still make decisions. The big one, I guess, being, do you follow the protocols or not? It's easier to follow them. Less guilt in following them. Not no guilt, less guilt. But I can't talk about guilt, that's not going to save me. So it's all about choices. One Monday, in the middle of it all, I was on my way in. It was early. I popped into the co-op at the end of our street. Well, it's more a petrol station really. It's got a bakery section. And I thought I'd take some pastries into the unit. So I pick up about 10 chocolate croissants, the raisin ones, the cinnamon ones, all of them really, the pecan ones. And they're all individually wrapped, which is different. And I take them to go and pay. So I take out my purse to pay, and there's 3 cards I can choose from. And I just stare at them, and I can't choose. I can't decide. I'm on my way in, and already I can't decide. And I'm frozen. I'm frozen, and I remember this distinctly. I'm frozen because I don't want to choose. I know I'm going to need all my stock of choices for when I get in on my shift. And I don't want to waste one of my stock of choices, of decisions, on this. So I turn around and there's a man behind me with a coffee, waiting to pay. And he's got his card in his hand, so I guess he's in a rush. And he stares at me impatiently. And then he sees the NHS lanyard round my neck. And he starts to cry. And he steps forward, taps his card on the machine, mumbles thank you, and then steps back into the queue. And his head's down now because he's crying. I got used to seeing people cry, you know, in the middle of it all. Patients, relatives, colleagues, before a shift, after a shift. I had the pecan one. I've always wondered what they tasted like. It got really real, really fast. One Monday I went in. I'd had the weekend off. Just slept really. And it was really early on, like April the 6th, something like that. Not sure. Anyways, so I asked the trainee medic who'd been in over the weekend how Friday's patients on the unit were. And she said, they're all dead. Really real. Really fast. And I tried to get a word with her later, the young medic, before she went off shift to see if she was okay. And I asked her how she was, and she didn't say anything for a really long time. And then she said, this is not what I thought medicine was going to be. That night when I went home, I'd recorded the daily briefing, so I watched it. And apparently everything was under control and we had PPE coming out of our ears. It was like watching a PowerPoint presentation from the deck of the Titanic on the joys of cruising after you'd hit the iceberg. I had to stop watching the daily briefings. They made me too angry. And anger takes energy, and in the middle of it all, you had to ration your energy, prioritise your energy, choose what you were going to put it towards. Another choice I found myself making was what to look at. You know that waiter thing in restaurants, where you want to ask something, but the waiter's perfected the art of navigating the restaurant without giving you or anyone else the chance to catch their eye. We can do that on the ward. You can look at the screen, look at the notes, look down the ward as if you're looking for someone. And I did that more than I should have. And that must have been awful for the patients. Because once you've got the gear on, once you've donned the gear, once you're suited and booted, the only real human contact is the eyes. And at times I couldn't cope with that. So I'd look away. And I know that's a kind of abandonment. And I know that I've got to live with that. But to be honest, it wasn't always possible to isolate myself within my isolation suit, because you can avert your eyes, but you can't avert your ears. The sound was muffled, but you could still hear. And I've got the soundtrack loop stuck in my head. It goes, you go in, laboured breathing, strained breathing, gasping for air. And then when you're on a ventilator and you can't speak, but you can moan, and then the oxygen alarms go off, and a lot of oxygen alarms were going off. And then the same two words repeated, SATS levels. The level of oxygen in the blood, it's a percentage that's a lifeline or a death sentence. Not being able to breathe isn't an easy way to die. There are easy ways to die in hospital, but not being able to breathe isn't one of them. But it was in the air, wasn't it? Dying because you couldn't breathe. In the air. When that policeman murdered George Floyd, that's what he said, wasn't it? Mr. Floyd, I can't breathe. And no one did anything to help him. On the unit. We were doing everything we could to help people, but sometimes, but often, it didn't make any difference. They died. And this went on for weeks. For months, actually. And there were more black men there too. What's the phrase? A disproportionate number. Got to hate the language of it all. Language has a way of sanitising things. It's ironic. Of distancing things. Of keeping what was being said 2 meters from reality. Ethnic minorities appear to be disproportionately affected by the virus. But where I was, that proportion, that disproportion, every single bit of it was a person with a family. And when they died, if they were lucky, they could have one person from their family with them. And that's not how it's supposed to be. So yes, we noticed the ethnic minority disproportion really early on. And I can only imagine what it must have been like for someone who works at the hospital who's from an ethnic minority. Because let's be crystal clear about this. Without them, the NHS would collapse. It would collapse. So despite the risks, the disproportionate risks, which were really clear really early on, they still came into work. They still made that decision. And that's the difference, isn't it? Between the politicians upstream in their protective bubble and us down here wading through the swamp. You know, the politicians make a decision and downstream, as a result, someone may die. Statistically distance people. But downstream, in the swamp, I make a decision and a real person dies. I see them die. I see the curtain go around them for the last time. And I may die. Early on, I made sure my husband knew where my will was. Got 2 young kids. Got to think of these things. What was the most scary was that it could turn so fast. a day or two from fine to dead. And when you see that a few times, it goes in deep and you never shake the fear of it. But when a colleague gets it, then you're really scared, because you've seen what can happen. And you're scared for them, and you're scared for you, because you've been working together in the same place, you know, facing the same risks, wearing the same protective clothing. So if it can get them, despite all the precautions, it can get you. I thought about my children a lot at that point. The gear is really hot when you're in it, but getting into it was just a performance. You have to have someone to help you do it. It's like you're 3 again and your mum's dressing you. Suit, apron, mask, visor, gloves, tape round gloves. The tape your gloves round your wrists. Oh, and remember to push down hard on the metal strip on your nose. And I remember thinking one time, if I don't push down hard enough on this metal strip, is this what's going to kill me? Actually, it was more than one time. And you're sweating even before you leave the donning area. And once you're on the ward, there's a lot of machines working, and machines leak heat, don't they? You feel the sweat trickling down your back. Slightly sticky for the whole shift. And that's not very nice. Sometimes I used to have to hold up an iPad to patients so relatives could say goodbye. One time there was this older West Indian gentleman. I held the iPad up to him with my gloved hand, and his wife sang "Abide with Me." And then I switched the iPad off. What am I supposed to do with that memory? I liked the clapping on Thursdays. I liked the clapping. I did feel loved. We felt loved. Made me feel like a superhero. But I don't want to be a superhero anymore. I just want to be a doctor. I started off talking about choices, and I think I should end back there too. Because there's people I owe it to find a way forward. I lost colleagues. We all did. But what I can't get out of my head is the choices that they made. They knew what was happening. They knew how unprepared we were. They knew how little we knew about what we were facing. And they knew that saving lives might cost them theirs. And they still chose to come to work. And I know what they would have said if I'd asked them. because I knew the people that died. They weren't just colleagues, they were friends, and I'm not going to allow them to become statistics. They would have said it's their job, and they didn't have a choice. But they did have a choice, and they chose to walk into the fire. And now they're out of choices. But we're not. We've still got choices left. We need to make them wisely.